I never imagined my life would turn out this way. Looking back, I can hardly recognize the woman I used to be, the wife of a man who was the epitome of what every woman dreams of. Richard was everything to me. He was the kind of man people spoke about with admiration and respect, a man of integrity, a pillar in the community, someone who carried himself with quiet confidence. He was a good provider, working tirelessly to ensure we had a comfortable life. Our friends admired him, my family adored him, and I was proud to be his wife. But sometimes, pride and love are not enough to keep temptation at bay. It started innocently, as most affairs do. Richard had a work commitment and couldn't attend a family party, a gathering he would have usually been the life of. I remember feeling a bit lonely that evening, a little disconnected from the laughter and chatter around me. Perhaps it was that slight feeling of being adrift, combined with the knowledge that Richard wouldn't be there to ground me, that made me vulnerable. That's when I met Michael. He was a distant cousin of one of my relatives, someone I'd never seen before. From the moment we started talking, there was an undeniable spark. He was charming in a way that Richard, with all his steadfastness, never was. Michael had an effortless charisma, a way of making me feel seen and heard. We spent the evening together, moving from polite conversation to deeper, more personal topics. The more we talked, the more I felt a connection, one that I hadn't felt in a long time. As the night wore on, the lines between right and wrong began to blur. We found ourselves alone in a quiet corner of the house, away from the eyes of family and friends. I knew it was wrong, but in that moment, my desire to escape from the ordinary, to feel something different, took over. One kiss led to another, and before I knew it, we had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. The next morning, I woke up with a pit in my stomach, the weight of what I had done pressing down on me. I told myself it was a mistake, a moment of weakness that would never happen again. I convinced myself that I could keep it hidden, that Richard would never have to know. But guilt has a way of seeping into every aspect of your life, tainting even the moments that should be happy. Richard noticed the change in me almost immediately. He was too perceptive to miss the way I had become distant, the way I avoided his touch, his gaze. He didn't confront me right away, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind. He knew something was wrong, but he waited, observing, giving me the chance to come clean. When he finally did confront me, it wasn't with anger or accusations. Richard was calm, almost heartbreakingly so. He sat me down, looked me in the eyes, and asked me to tell him the truth. I tried to deny it at first, but under his steady gaze, I broke down. I confessed everything, every detail of my betrayal. I expected him to explode, to yell, to throw me out of the house. But Richard wasn't that kind of man. Instead, he took a deep breath, his eyes filled with a pain that I knew I had caused. He didn't say much, just that he needed time to think. He wasn't the kind of man to make rash decisions, even in the face of such a deep betrayal. For weeks, he remained distant but polite, still taking care of his responsibilities, still treating me with a kindness that I didn't deserve. It was as if he was processing everything, weighing his options, trying to figure out if there was any way to save our marriage. For a time, I clung to the hope that we could work through it, that he would forgive me, and we could somehow rebuild what I had shattered. But deep down, I knew the truth. Richard was a man of principle, and my betrayal had cut too deep. A year later, he asked for a divorce. By then, the cracks in our marriage had become too wide to ignore. He had been patient, had tried to see if there was any way to move forward, but in the end, he knew that he couldn't live with what I had done. I tried to put on a brave face, convinced myself that I could move on too. But the reality of our separation hit me harder than I ever expected. Our group of friends, once so tight-knit, began to fracture. The men sided with Richard, and naturally, their wives followed. It was as if I had become a pariah, someone they could no longer trust. I tried to maintain the friendships, but it was clear that things would never be the same. The women who had once been like sisters to me now treated me with a cold politeness that was worse than outright hostility. But the most painful loss was Richard's family. They had welcomed me with open arms when we first got married, treating me as one of their own. I had grown close to them, especially his mother, who had been like a second mother to me. But after the divorce, they cut me off completely. I would see them on social media, smiling at family gatherings, enjoying life as if I had never been a part of it. It broke my heart to see how easily I had been replaced, how quickly they had moved on without me. As for Michael, the man I had risked everything for, our relationship quickly turned sour. At first, he was attentive, trying his best to fill the void that Richard had left. But I couldn't shake the resentment I felt toward him, even though I knew it was misplaced. I blamed him for everything, for the destruction of my marriage, for the loss of my friends, for the emptiness that now consumed my life. Our relationship, built on the ruins of my marriage, crumbled under the weight of my guilt and regret. Years passed, and I watched from the sidelines as Richard rebuilt his life. He found love again, with a woman from our old circle of friends, someone I had once considered a close friend. It stung to see them together, to see how happy they were, how easily she had stepped into the life I had thrown away. Jealousy gnawed at me, even though I knew I had no right to feel that way. As I grew older, I realized the full extent of the mistake I had made. It wasn't just the loss of Richard, or our friends, or his family. It was the loss of the life I had once had, a life that had been full of love, respect, and happiness. I had thrown it all away for a moment of weakness, a fleeting desire that had left me with nothing but regret. Now, I live with the consequences of my actions, haunted by the choices I made. The loneliness is unbearable at times, and the regret never fades. I see Richard's life, so full of love and happiness, and I know that I will never have that again. I am left with the shadow of my mistake, a shadow that will follow me for the rest of my life. Some mistakes change the trajectory of your life in ways you can never undo. I learned that too late, and now, all I have left are the memories of what I lost. The life I could have had, the love I could have cherished, the family I could have been a part of, all gone because of one foolish, selfish decision. And that is a regret I will carry with me until the end of my days.